I will be deep diving in a video anthology detailing how the literacy rate was the main factor that led to the poverty that plagues Detroit. How due to the literacy rate, the corporate oligarchy was able to use rich white men's dirty tricks to steal retirement pensions and then later foreclose on Detroit residents' homes. I will bring evidence to show that it was state designed for this to happen, to cheat the Detroit city residents out of what they earned.
First thing that strikes you when you drive around Detroit is the number of abandoned buildings, the ghosts of a city that was. Early in 2009, I came here to investigate the city's failing public schools for my weekly television news program. But when my team and I started digging, we found a story that was much more complex than we had imagined. So we decided to spend a year documenting a school district in crisis and the students who are trapped in the system with nowhere else to go.
Get back into school. Everybody back in the warrants office.
We can't go.
What we do? Let's go. Because you should be in school or going home. That's why.
No.
Man.
We was going back to the school. I used to see how they treat me.
We're back to the school.
At Osborne School, 800 or 900 students come in as 9th graders. By the time they're 10th graders, it's down to 545 students. By the time they reach 11th grade, it's down to 345 students. When this same cohort reached 12th grade, it's 245 students to graduate. And by then they've had to take the high stakes test, the MEP test, in the 4 main areas. And remember, it's minimum competencies. 11 students, 11 passed the MEP test. What are the other 780 students going to do for employment? The economics of poverty have devastated Detroit, and without a successful public education system, like most of the urban centers, they're not going to make it.
The children is not first when it comes to Detroit public schools. Some of them, when they graduate from high school, they still can't read, they still can't add, subtract.
They don't care if you're gonna learn. They will not show you how to do it or nothing.
One of my teachers told me if I come to his class, he said he would just pass me if I just show up and shut up. They say they make their money whether we learn or not.
And if the teachers don't care because they feel like you don't care, you feel like, what's the point? Why should I come here every single day and waste my time and waste your time?
Our country's educational system is broken. That's probably not news to you. Scan the headlines in the paper, magazine covers, television news reports, and if there's a story about American public education, you're likely to hear the word crisis.
These test scores seem to be going down every year.
Test scores are low.
Students returning to class this week are less likely to finish high school than their parents.
Dropout rates are high.
We can't teach with 50 students in a class.
Classrooms are overcrowded.
There's a major difference between the graduation rates of white students and black students.
The gap between the educational haves and the have-nots is growing.
We feel this huge sense of urgency. In this country, we have a 25% dropout rate.
Those who urge reform see the status quo and say it's the product of decades of neglect, and that we as Americans can no longer afford to look the other way, that we must do a far better job of educating our youth if we want to be competitive in the world economy, if we want to make sure our children and our children's children continue to enjoy a standard of living we have come to take for granted.
And so I'd like to just open up and have a bit of a conversation.
In May 2009, President Obama's newly appointed Secretary of Education, Duggan, took this message to Detroit to direct national attention to a city whose very name has become synonymous with economic blight, urban decay, failed school.
God, I am tired of that argument. I don't have to go to Detroit to know that it smells.
The city's become a punchline in the popular culture for jokes about the worst of the worst.
Take him to Detroit. No! No, not Detroit! No! No, please!
Many journalists have come to Detroit to take pictures of abandoned buildings and to write earnest essays about what's wrong here. They often call the city a ghost town.
I need you to hit the like button.
Detroiters are understandably defensive over outsiders coming here and criticizing their city.
You could make a pretty good case, unfortunately, that Detroit is ground zero education in this country.
Duggan had a lot to say about Detroit's failing schools, but one phrase he used drowned out all the others.
What is going on in Detroit is an educational disgrace.
He called the Detroit public schools a national disgrace. Many people here were offended that their city was singled out, but perhaps Secretary Duggan wasn't so much pointing the finger at them. Maybe he was pointing at all of us for allowing something like this to happen.
I mean, if we'd have been wiped out by a hurricane here, everybody would be flocking here to tell the story of Detroit and how bad things are and how children are being cheated. Because this has been sort of a self-inflicted rolling disaster over the last 20 years, nobody really seems to care about us here anymore.
Nolan.
You can't scare me, you slant-eyed yellow bastard. Take him to Detroit. No! No, not Detroit! No! No, please! Anything but that!
Lawyers flew in from California to file this lawsuit here in Detroit today. They say they saw our stories about what's been going on in schools in Detroit, both the public schools and charter schools. They say they believe it's unconstitutional, so they're helping kids sue. This is the lawsuit filed by 5 kids who went to some of the lowest performing charter and public schools in Detroit. One of them is a senior at Osborne High School, Jamaria Hall. He is sick of being sent to the gym to play basketball during Spanish class because he has no Spanish teacher.
I'm getting cheated. Like, I'm getting cheated out of education. Like, I'm not getting the same opportunity as everybody else.
Jamaria says there have been times when he didn't have an English teacher. He can read because of support at home. Other kids aren't so lucky.
We don't have enough books to really even read, for kids to even practice on reading.
The lawsuit is against the state education officials, and Governor Rick Snyder. It says they have created an education system of inequity where inner city schools are less likely to provide opportunities for all kids because of resources.
Would Governor Snyder assign his own children to the schools in Detroit?
The lawsuit says that by underfunding education, the state is denying students their constitutional right to literacy.
Detroit public school students rank dead last among all major school districts in literacy.
I think it's not fair. It has been totally negligent in addressing these problems. The onus is on the state of Michigan to set this wrong right.
Reading and writing are the fundamentals of education, but the president of the Detroit School Board says the learning disability has been a lifelong challenge for him. Fox News' Ron Savage reports from Detroit.
You survived, you made it. Now you're telling me people with disability cannot be leaders?
The president of the Detroit School Board is taking his licks for being unable to write a sentence that makes sense. His emails were published in the Detroit News and Free Press. Do DPS control the foundation or outside group? If an outside group control the foundation, then what is DPS board role with selection of its director? Are we mixing DPS and non-DPS roles? And who is the watchdog? As a child, Otis Mathis was placed in special ed.
So, of course, they put me in special ed, and my parents fought to get me out, but it set me back a half a year.
Mathis, a U.S. Navy veteran, is a math whiz. In high school, he took 4 years of algebra, 2 geometry, trigonometry, and calculus. He aced the college math exams, but he never had success writing sentences. A Wayne State professor told him he had a disability he would need to deal with.
She told me that, the way you talk, you don't even write the way you talk. So there's a disconnect in your brain, that through your vocal, is, I can understand you. You make sense. But when that signal goes to your fingers to write, something happens.
Elected to the school board in January 2008, all the other school board members voted him in as president in January of this year. It's a 2-year term. School's emergency financial manager Robert Bobb told Fox 2 he's only concerned with Mathis' ability to get the job done, and he believes he's doing that. Mathis believes he's a role model for kids who are dealing with a learning disability.
So I think hopefully I am. When I was telling the kids for the 2 years in a special ed class of the earth and natural science, figure out a way to go around that wall, over that wall, under. Some people can go right through the wall. So I hope I am.
In Detroit, Ron Savage, Fox 2 News.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Wilson. I'm a student in the city of Detroit. And on Martin Luther King Day, 119 parents, organizers, students, we traveled from the city of Detroit to attend Betsy DeVos's hearing. Running on 3 hours of sleep, we waited in line. Mrs. DeVos, I waited to listen to you for 7 hours. Now it's time for you to listen to me.
The failure here in Detroit is of epic proportions. You have the kids that are smarter than their parents and the educators, the one that's supposed to be educating them, as we can see here in the video clips that I've provided. As a sad state where the kids have to fend for themselves and to gain their own education due to their own due diligence to want to pursue being educated. It was a failure from City Council, the hierarchy of DPS. They're so poor and poverty stricken that they sell the kids out every chance that they get.
Last night, you said you were a visual learner, which is perfect because I'm an artist. Let me paint you a picture. A picture that explains what you've done to me, to my family, and to my peers in the city of Detroit. Throughout my middle and high school career, I've always been the poster child, but I've also been in oversized classrooms with outdated textbooks. I've been a victim of principal turnovers. My parents drive 165 miles a week for quality education. There are 4,000 high school students in my neighborhood who have access to one high school within a 15 square miles. But just 30 miles away, there are 2,000 high school students with access to 11 high schools just a block away. However, despite the miles that determine access to quality education, the schools in Detroit are poor, and it is not because we are poor. My four siblings and I have attended 22 schools throughout our academic careers in search of satisfaction, a satisfaction that rests in every student's heart in Detroit, a satisfaction that is selective and selfish, a satisfaction that holds all of our educational needs and our innovative wants, a satisfaction that our eyes haven't seen, a satisfaction that our hearts can only hope for, a satisfaction that has been stolen from me for way too long because of the naive and narrow policies pushed by Betsy DeVos. That Detroit students are denied daily due to the depravity institutionalized by Betsy DeVos and her duplicates. This satisfaction needs passion. It doesn't need practicality or politics. It needs you, it needs me, it needs all of us, collectively. And the search of this satisfaction does not start with Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education for the United States of America. Thank you for listening to me, and hearing my story. Now I'm going to turn it over to Hillary.
This fight is personal for me, coming from being born in Mount Clemens, then being shipped out to Marlette, Michigan, a place called Teen Ranch, where I was the only black in the whole town. The town was so small, the high school and middle school was in the same school. I get to 10th grade in Detroit High School, going to Redford High School. I'm in honors English and science. In honors science, I'm taking a test one day. I get to the 12th question. Went up to the teacher and said, yo, I took this test before. He was like, nah, sit your ass down. Okay, went back and sat down, answered a couple more. I got to about the 20th something question. I said, I'm trying to rack my brain. Where did I take this damn test? And then it just blew me away. I said, oh shit, I took this test in 7th grade in Marlette High School, where I was the only black in the whole town. There's a country-ass rural area town. I'm taking the same test in the 10th grade honors class in Detroit, Michigan. Same test I took in a rural area white country high school in 7th grade. It showed me and woke me up to the inequality and the literacy by design by the state of Michigan.
Do a better wave than that, you guys. 3, 2, 1. I'm Chase. I'm also going to Thursday University. I'm Nathan. I'm going to Thursday University. I'm Kyle. I'm also going to I'm Logan. I'm going to Buffalo University. I'm Emily. I'm going to the University of Michigan Flint. Carson. I'm going to Michigan State. I'm Maggie. I'm going to the University of Michigan. I'm Sam. I'm going to the University of Minnesota. I'm Bailey. I'm going to I'm Ryan. I'm also going to Belgium. I'm going to and that's I'm going to I'm going to Delta. I'm Andy. I'm going to SC4. I'm Courtney. I'm going to SC4. I'm going to SC4. I'm Mackenzie. I'm going to SC4. I'm Andre. I'm going to the Air Force. I'm Will. I'm going to Marines. I'm Kyle. I'm going to
Caleb. I'm going to Lincoln Tech.
I'm Richard, and I'm just going to work. I'm Seth Pratt. I'm going to work at CIA Net Corps Machines.
It's a great day to be a state champion.
Feels good to start the season the first day and be the last 2 teams down the last day. Feels real special.
I'm happy. I'm just glad we're here. We're proving a lot of people wrong. We're showing people we can do it.
No public schools in the country are in as bad a crisis as those in Detroit. From 1999 to 2012, more than $100 million was spent upgrading schools that were closed within a few years. Detroit has closed more than 2/3 of its buildings since 2000, leaving many of them boarded up, abandoned, and ripe for looting.
Supercenter has officially opened its doors in Detroit. The new store is on the city's west side, and it used to be home to Redford High School.
3, 2, 1.
Myers, a second supercenter in Detroit, is now open for business. People who live near the old Redford and Brightmoor neighborhoods will be able to grab fresh groceries every day at the 200,000 square foot location, which is at the site of former Redford High School.
They can hate if they wanna. I don't care.
Redford High School.
They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. Yeah. I said let them hate if they wanna. I don't care. I don't care. No, no, no. They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. Yeah. I said let them hate if they wanna. I don't care. No, no, no. They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. Yeah. I said let them hate if they wanna. I don't care. No, no, no. They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. Yeah. I said let them hate if they wanna. I don't care. I don't care. No, no, no. They can hate if they wanna. I don't care. Yeah. I said let them hate if they wanna. I don't care. I don't care. No, no, no. All your friends keep saying you can do better with somebody else. Hey, saying I'm dangerous if you can do bad all by yourself. Hey, everybody got something to say. They don't even wanna see why they talk so badly. I actually make you happy. All that matters is I sing, and I don't even give a damn. When you are my better man, so tell them if they wanna hear it again. Let them talk about it. Everybody says you're too slow for me, and the life I live. You ain't out in the club all night. You wanna be the quiet part of my life. They don't understand how beautiful that is. Hey, everybody got something to say. They don't even wanna see what they're talking so badly. I actually make you happy and all. And I don't even give a damn. You want my better man, tell them if they wanna hate it, yeah. Let them talk about it. See it again, see it again, see it again, see it again. Oh, let them hate them, yes, if they want to. It could be you and me, it could be me and you against the world, baby. I don't care, no matter what they say, you and me, let them talk about it.
like button so it can register on YouTube algorithm. That's why I don't monetize it. All I need you to do, and again, if you enjoy this free content, this free information, and you leave here smarter, which is my intentions, then go ahead and hit the like button and share. Now I'm going to show you the difference between the two different schools. One was focused on academia, where we had speed reading machines, computers, and this is in the 80s. And of course, Black high school is just focused on sports. If your parent is inadequate because they felt that the education that they received was good, why would they fight for you to have better? I think, and that's the problem I think that we have in Detroit, that the parents don't know any better. They do not know what a proper education is. It's because it's been hidden from extra education outside the systematic prison and pipeline school system that they're having our children go through. All they do in urban areas is push sports. It's the reason why they don't provide enough books. There's no computers in the classroom. It's to push you in one direction, to be the entertainment. And even if you look at it, look how we celebrate. It's all entertainment. If you notice from the Marlette High School, look how small that school was. Look how successful all those kids were and how long it's been there. Since 1967, a rural area town, small country town, mostly farm work. This is how far we behind. I've made this video to bring clarity. For parents, you need to step up. If you really love your kids, if you really love them, want them not to just exist, to make it. Notice what the boy stated at the beginning. Oh, nobody thought we'd make it. I don't want to make it. I want our kids to be extraordinary.